My name is Camilla. I'm 28 years old, and what I'm about to tell you happened on what should have been the happiest night of my life. 2 hours after saying I do to the man of my dreams, I was standing in our honeymoon suite at the Ritz-Carlton in Boston when everything I thought I knew shattered. Marcus had just stepped onto the balcony with his phone, his face changing from loving husband to someone I didn't recognize. Then came the whispers in a language I couldn't understand, followed by the door bursting open and his sister Jade stumbling in, pale and shaking. Before I continue this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear how my perfect marriage crumbled in just one night. 3 years ago, I met Marcus at a charity gala in Manhattan. I was there representing the small nonprofit where I worked, feeling completely out of place among the designer gowns and diamond necklaces. Then this incredibly handsome man approached me at the silent auction table, making a joke about how the modern art piece looked like his 5-year-old nephew's finger painting. His smile was warm, genuine, nothing like the practiced charm of the other wealthy donors I'd been trying to impress all evening. Marcus told me he was a real estate developer, had been building his empire since graduating from Harvard Business School. His confidence wasn't arrogant, just assured, like someone who knew exactly where he was going in life. We talked for 3 hours that night about everything from our favorite books to our childhood dreams. He grew up in Boston, lost his father when he was 15, and had been taking care of his mother Margaret and younger sister Jade ever since. Our first date was a week later, nothing fancy, just coffee and a walk through Central Park. He remembered I'd mentioned loving autumn leaves, so he planned it for peak foliage season. That's how Marcus was always paying attention to the little details. 6 months in, he surprised me with a trip to Paris for my birthday. We stayed in this tiny boutique hotel near the Seine, ate too many croissants, and kissed at the top of the Eiffel Tower like tourists. I know it sounds cliché, but with Marcus, even the clichés felt fresh and exciting. The proposal came exactly 2 years after we met on a cliff overlooking the sunset in Santorini. He'd coordinated with the hotel staff to have rose petals scattered everywhere, a string quartet playing my favorite song. The ring was a 3-carat cushion-cut diamond that had belonged to his grandmother. When he got down on one knee, he was actually shaking. This powerful businessman who negotiated million-dollar deals daily was nervous about asking me to marry him. Of course I said yes. Meeting his family was interesting from the start. Margaret was elegant, refined, the kind of woman who wore pearls to breakfast and never had a hair out of place. She was polite to me, always polite, but there was something distant in her eyes, like she was constantly evaluating whether I was good enough for her son. She insisted on hosting dinner parties where I'd be introduced to their circle, all wealthy families with connections going back generations. I'm from Ohio. My parents are retired high school teachers, so this world was completely foreign to me. Jade was different though, or at least I thought she was. 24 years old, working on her master's in international relations at Georgetown. She seemed nervous around Marcus, which I initially interpreted as typical younger sibling dynamics. Sometimes when we'd all have dinner together, I'd catch her staring at her brother with this expression I couldn't quite read. Fear maybe, or concern. When I asked Marcus about it once, he laughed it off, said Jade had always been the anxious type, worried about everything since she was little. The wedding planning should have been my first real warning sign, but I was too caught up in the fairy tale to notice. Margaret insisted on using specific vendors, people she'd known for years, she said. When I suggested alternatives, maybe something more budget-friendly since my parents were contributing what they could, she'd wave her hand dismissively and say Marcus would handle it. The venue had to be the Fairmont Copley Plaza, the flowers from this particular boutique florist, the cake from a baker who only took clients through referrals. Strange things started happening about 3 months before the wedding. Our first photographer suddenly backed out, claiming a family emergency. The backup Margaret suggested was immediately available despite usually being booked 2 years in advance. The wedding planner I'd chosen on my own got into a car accident, nothing serious, but enough that she had to withdraw from our event. Margaret had a replacement ready within hours. My best friend Sophie tried to warn me that something felt off. She'd been my roommate in college, knew me better than anyone, and she kept saying Marcus was moving too fast, that his family seemed too controlling. But when you're in love, really in love, you explain away the doubts. Marcus always had perfectly reasonable explanations for everything. The vendors were just business connections. His mother was particular because she wanted everything perfect for her only son's wedding. Jade was stressed about her thesis. My parents flew in from Ohio 3 days before the wedding. They looked so out of place at the rehearsal dinner, my dad in his one good suit that was 10 years old, my mom wearing the same dress she'd worn to my college graduation. Marcus's family friends were dripping in designer everything, talking about their summer homes and yacht clubs. But Marcus was wonderful with my parents, made sure they were included in every conversation, treated them with genuine respect and warmth. The night before the wedding, Jade pulled me aside at the bachelorette party. She'd had a few drinks, maybe more than a few, and she grabbed my arm in the bathroom of the upscale bar Margaret had chosen. Her grip was tight, almost painful, and she started to say something about Marcus, about the family. But then Margaret appeared, and Jade immediately let go, mumbling something about being drunk and emotional about her brother getting married. The wedding day itself was perfect, at least on the surface. 400 guests, a string orchestra, flowers that cost more than my annual salary. Margaret cried during the ceremony, but they weren't happy tears, I realize that now. There was something desperate in the way she dabbed at her eyes, kept looking toward the exits like she was planning escape routes. When Marcus said his vows, promising to protect and cherish me forever, his voice was steady, convincing. I believed every word. The reception was a blur of congratulations, champagne toasts, and envelope after envelope of wedding gifts being discreetly handed to Margaret's assistant. I noticed that most of the gifts were cash-thick envelopes that disappeared into a locked box. Marcus said it was traditional in his family's circle that checks were considered tacky. The cash would go toward our future, he promised, maybe a house in the suburbs, once we were ready for children. Sophie hugged me goodbye, looking worried, whispering that I should call her if I ever needed anything, day or night. My parents seemed overwhelmed but happy, my mother taking approximately 1,000 photos with her phone. As Marcus and I left for our honeymoon suite, rose petals being thrown by guests, I caught a glimpse of Jade near the exit, her phone pressed to her ear, her face pale and serious. But then Marcus was sweeping me into the limo, kissing me deeply, and I forgot about everything except being Mrs. Marcus Wellington. The suite was incredible, overlooking the Boston skyline, champagne already chilling, rose petals scattered on the king-sized bed. Marcus carried me over the threshold, both of us laughing at the cliché of it all. We decided to stay in Boston for our wedding night before flying to Bora Bora the next afternoon. I was standing at the window, still in my reception dress, a shorter version I'd changed into for dancing, when his phone rang at exactly 11:30. He glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor shifted. The loving husband disappeared, replaced by someone cold, calculating. He answered in English, just saying yes, then stepped out onto the balcony, sliding the door shut behind him. But I could still see him through the glass, watched as he began speaking rapidly in what sounded like Russian or some Eastern European language I didn't recognize. I pretended to be touching up my makeup at the vanity, but I was watching Marcus in the mirror's reflection. His body language was tense, aggressive, nothing like the calm businessman persona he usually projected. Through the cracked balcony door, I caught fragments of his conversation, words that made my blood run cold. 50 million was mentioned repeatedly, then 3 days. Something about a shipment arriving on schedule. The way he was speaking, it wasn't like his normal business calls about property developments or investment opportunities. This was different, urgent, almost desperate. He kept checking his watch, running his hand through his dark hair in that way he did when something was seriously wrong. I heard him say something about the Boston Harbor, about containers being ready, about payment being transferred to the Cyprus account. When he noticed me watching through the mirror, our eyes met for a split second. The look he gave me wasn't love or even recognition, it was assessment, like he was calculating whether I'd heard too much, whether I was now a problem that needed to be handled. He quickly ended the call, slipping the phone into his pocket as he came back inside. His transformation was instant, that megawatt smile sliding back into place as he crossed the room to wrap his arms around me from behind. He nuzzled my neck, murmuring about how beautiful I looked, how lucky he was. But his hands felt cold against my skin, and when he kissed me, I could taste something metallic like fear or adrenaline. He was trying too hard, being too affectionate, and for the first time since I'd met him, Marcus's touch made me uncomfortable. I played along, giggling about being nervous on our wedding night, letting him lead me toward the bed. But then his phone rang again, a different ringtone this time, sharp and demanding. He cursed under his breath, actually cursed something Marcus never did in front of me. He apologized, said it was an emergency with an overseas development, that he'd just be a minute. This time he locked himself in the bathroom. I pressed my ear against the door, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. His voice was different now, submissive, almost like he was speaking to someone who terrified him. I heard him say, "The wife doesn't know anything, that I was clean, that everything was proceeding according to plan." He mentioned my name, specifically said I was the perfect cover, that my background had checked out completely. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Cover for what exactly? What did my background have to do with his business? I remembered all those documents I'd signed during wedding planning, things Margaret had said were standard prenups and insurance policies. Had I agreed to something without realizing it? Then came the pounding on our suite door, so loud and sudden, I actually jumped. Before I could move, the door burst open and there was Jade using what must have been an emergency keycard. Her bridesmaid dress was torn at the shoulder, mascara streaming down her face in black rivers. She was carrying a large designer bag, her knuckles white from gripping it so tightly. She looked around wildly until she spotted me, then rushed over, grabbing my hands. Her palms were sweaty, shaking. Behind the bathroom door, Marcus was still talking, his voice rising in what sounded like an argument. He hadn't heard his sister's dramatic entrance over his own heated conversation. Jade's eyes bore into mine with an intensity I'd never seen from her before. She squeezed my hands so tight it hurt, leaning in close enough that I could smell the fear radiating off her like perfume. Her voice was barely a whisper, but filled with more urgency than any scream could convey. She said just one word that changed everything. "Run." Jade upended the designer bag onto the bed, and my breath caught as stack after stack of $100 bills tumbled out. The money seemed surreal against the romantic rose petals, probably 30 bundles held together with bank bands. She was talking fast, her words tumbling over each other as she kept glancing at the bathroom door. "This is $30,000, she said, everything I could grab from Mom's safe without her noticing. "You need to take this and leave right now. Don't pack anything, don't leave a note, just go. Get in a car, drive north to Canada. Don't use credit cards, don't call anyone. Especially not your parents." I stared at her in complete shock, unable to process what was happening. This was supposed to be my wedding night. I was supposed to be making love to my new husband, not receiving emergency cash from his sister, while he conducted suspicious business calls in our honeymoon suite bathroom. I asked her what she was talking about. Why would I need to run from Marcus? That's when she told me his name wasn't even Marcus Wellington. His real name was Mikhail Volkov, and the Wellington identity was just one of many he used. The real estate development company was legitimate on paper, but it was actually a massive money laundering operation for the Russian Bratva, one of the most dangerous crime syndicates operating on the East Coast. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos she'd taken of documents, showing them to me with trembling fingers. Wire transfer records showing millions moving through shell companies, coded messages between Marcus and unknown contacts, photographs of him meeting with men who looked like they'd stepped out of a crime documentary. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. "Your husband is not who you think he is," she said. "The family you married into doesn't exist. That woman you call Margaret isn't his mother. She's his handler, a former KGB operative who's been running this cell since the Soviet Union collapsed. They've been using marriages to American citizens as a way to legitimize their operations, creating perfect facades for their trafficking networks." My legs felt weak, and I had to sit down on the edge of the bed, cash scattered around me like confetti from hell. I wanted to laugh, to tell Jade this was insane, that she was having some kind of breakdown. But something in her eyes, the absolute terror mixed with determination, made me listen. "You're the fourth wife," she continued. "They call them swallows after the old Soviet term. Young American women with clean backgrounds, No criminal connections, no red flags that might attract attention. The first was Jessica Chen, married to Marcus for 8 months before she died in a car accident. Only it wasn't an accident, the brake lines were cut. I've seen the real police report, not the one that was filed officially. She showed me a photo on her phone of a young woman pretty smiling wearing a wedding dress almost identical to mine. The second was Dana Morrison. She lasted 13 months before supposedly moving to Europe to care for a sick relative. No one's heard from her since her social media went dark. Her family received one postcard from Prague, then nothing. The third was Lucia Rodriguez. The official story was suicide depression following a miscarriage. But Lucia never had a miscarriage. She discovered what Marcus really was and tried to go to the FBI. Each woman's family received substantial insurance payouts after their disappearances. Jade explained enough money to ensure their silence, or maybe they were threatened. She didn't know all the details, but she'd been piecing it together for months, going through Margaret's files when she wasn't home, following paper trails that led to offshore accounts and phantom corporations. "The phone call tonight?" she said urgently, glancing at the bathroom door again. "It's about a shipment arriving in 3 days, but it's not real estate materials. It's people, Camilla. Human trafficking victims packed into shipping containers heading for Boston Harbor. $50 million worth of human cargo, mostly young women from Eastern Europe promised jobs in America, ending up in brothels and sweatshops." I felt like I might vomit. The man I'd just married, whose child I'd imagined having, was a human trafficker. Every kiss, every romantic gesture, every promise of love had been a calculated lie. I was nothing but a prop in his criminal enterprise, a disposable asset to make his operation look legitimate. "Marcus is supposed to coordinate the receipt of the shipment," Jade continued. "But something's gone wrong. The FBI is closing in. They've been investigating the network for 3 years, and tomorrow morning they're planning synchronized raids across the entire eastern seaboard. Marcus doesn't know about the raids yet, but he knows something's off. That's why he's panicking tonight." She grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at her. "The original plan was for you to die in a honeymoon accident in Bora Bora. Drowning while snorkeling, maybe a fall from a cliff while hiking. Marcus would play the grieving widower, collect the life insurance, and move on to the next wife. Your parents would be too devastated to ask questions, especially after receiving a generous settlement from the resort's insurance company." I thought about my parents asleep in their hotel room 3 blocks away, so proud of their daughter for marrying such a successful man. They had no idea they'd almost lost me, that they were probably on some kill list too if they became problems. The thought of anything happening to them because of my blindness made rage mix with the fear. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked Jade. "Why betray your own family?" She laughed bitterly. "They're not my family, Camilla. My name isn't even Jade Wellington." Jade reached into her bra and pulled out a small leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a badge and identification card. "FBI," it read. "Special Agent Jennifer Collins." The photo was definitely her, but with shorter, darker hair and a serious expression I'd never seen on Jade's face. "I've been undercover for 2 years," she said quietly. "Infiltrated the family through a carefully constructed identity as a distant cousin from the European branch of their operation. Margaret never fully trusted me, but Marcus needed someone to play his sister for the marriage con, and I was the right age, spoke fluent Russian, knew all the codes and protocols. My mind was reeling, trying to reconcile the shy, nervous girl I thought I knew with this federal agent sitting in front of me. Every family dinner, every wedding planning session, every time she'd seemed frightened of Marcus, it had all been an act. Or maybe not entirely an act, given what she knew about him. "The Bureau has been building this case for 3 years, she explained, talking faster now as we heard Marcus's voice getting louder in the bathroom. "We knew about the money laundering, the trafficking, but we needed concrete evidence, names of all the players, access to their communication networks. Your wedding was crucial for that. All those guests weren't just family friends, they're part of the network. The cash gifts weren't generous wedding presents. They were payments for various criminal enterprises being laundered through your celebration." She showed me more photos on her phone, surveillance shots of wedding guests I recognized, men in expensive suits who'd shaken my hand and wished me happiness. Each photo had notes attached listing their criminal specialties: arms dealing, drug trafficking, cybercrime, human organs. My wedding had been a convention of international criminals. We were going to let you go to Bora Bora. Jennifer continued. We had agents ready there would have extracted you before anything happened. But the timeline's been moved up. That call Marcus got was about the FBI raid someone in the Bureau leaked information. Not about me, thank God, but about the investigation. The entire network is about to scatter like roaches when you turn on the light. I could hear Marcus finishing his call, his footsteps approaching the bathroom door. Jennifer shoved the money toward me, then handed me a cheap flip phone. There's one number programmed in there. My handler, Special Agent David Park. Call him when you're safe. He'll get you into protective custody. Don't go to your parents. Don't go to your apartment. Don't go anywhere Marcus knows about. But what about you? I asked, terrified for her safety. She smiled grimly. I've got extraction protocols. Don't worry about me. But Camilla, you need to understand something. Even after Marcus is arrested, you won't be safe. This network has tentacles everywhere in law enforcement, politics, the justice system. You're going to be the star witness, the innocent American wife who can testify to everything you've seen and heard. They'll come after you. The bathroom door handle started turning. Jennifer stood up, pushing me toward the suite door. Take the stairs, not the elevator. There's a gray Honda Civic in the parking garage, level B2, spot 47. Keys are under the rear passenger wheel well. It's registered to a fake name, untraceable. Drive north, stay off highways where there are cameras. When you're at least 100 miles away, call the number. Marcus emerged from the bathroom just as I reached the door. For a split second, our eyes met across the room. I saw the exact moment he registered the scene, his sister with her FBI badge visible, me holding a bag of cash, the door open behind me. His face transformed from confusion to understanding to pure rage in less than a second. He reached into his jacket, and I saw the gun before Jennifer screamed that single word again. Run! I burst through the door and ran harder than I'd ever run in my life. The bag of money clutched against my chest, my shortened reception dress making it easier to move but my heels impossible. Behind me I heard crashing Jennifer yelling something in Russian, then a gunshot that made my ears ring even from the hallway. The elevator was right there, doors open, but Jennifer's warning echoed in my head. I pivoted toward the stairwell, ripping off my heels and taking the concrete steps 3 at a time barefoot. 20 floors of pure adrenaline-fueled descent, my dress catching on the metal railings, until I yanked it hard enough to tear the expensive fabric. I could hear doors slamming somewhere above me, couldn't tell if it was Marcus pursuing or other guests responding to the commotion. My feet were bleeding from the rough concrete, leaving red footprints I didn't have time to worry about. 15 floors, 10 floors, my legs burning, lungs screaming for air, but I couldn't stop. The parking garage was freezing, my breath coming out in visible puffs as I ran through the fluorescent-lit space. Level B2 spot. 47, the Honda, exactly where Jennifer said it would be. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the keys from under the wheel, while dropping them twice on the oil-stained concrete. The engine started immediately, thank God. I reversed out too fast, tires squealing, drawing attention I couldn't afford. As I navigated toward the exit, my headlights caught a black Escalade speeding down the ramp toward me. Through the windshield, I saw Marcus in the passenger seat, someone else driving, both faces murderous in the harsh garage lighting. I floored it, racing up the spiral exit ramp as the Escalade's lights flooded my rearview mirror. Burst out onto the Boston streets at 2 a.m, running a red light that earned angry honks from the few drivers out. The Escalade followed, ignoring traffic laws with the confidence of people who'd never faced consequences. My hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel as I took turns at random, trying to remember Jennifer's advice about avoiding highway cameras. The Escalade stayed close, too close, until I remembered something from a movie and yanked the wheel hard right into a narrow alley. The Honda fit barely side mirrors scraping brick walls. The Escalade was too wide. I heard the crash as they tried to follow and got wedged between the buildings. I came out the other side and immediately turned into a 24-hour Walmart parking lot, pulling into a spot between two camper vans that hid the Honda from view. My whole body was shaking, teeth chattering from cold and fear. After 10 minutes of watching for the Escalade, I forced myself to move. Inside Walmart, I became someone else, bought scissors, black hair-dye jeans, sneakers, a Patriots hoodie, paying cash from the stash Jennifer had given me. In the fluorescent bathroom, I cut my long blonde hair into a choppy bob, watching years of careful growing fall into the trash. The black dye stung my scalp, stained my forehead, but 30 minutes later, the woman in the mirror was unrecognizable. Back in the Honda, I finally pulled out the burner phone Jennifer had given me. My fingers hesitated over the single programmed number. Once I made this call, there was no going back. I'd be witness protection, testifying against my husband and his criminal empire, living in fear for the rest of my life. But the alternative was becoming another tragic accident, another wife who disappeared. I pressed call. It rang twice before a calm male voice answered. "Ms. Camilla, this is Special Agent David Park. Agent Collins told me to expect your call. Are you safe?" "For now," I said, my voice hoarse from fear and exhaustion. She told me to drive north. He gave me directions to a safe house in New Hampshire, very specific about which routes to take, which gas stations were safe to stop at. As I drove through this dark Massachusetts countryside, he stayed on the line, asking me to describe everything I'd heard Marcus say on his calls, every detail I could remember about the wedding guests, the cash transactions, anything that might help their case. At 4 a.m, I stopped at an ATM in a small town, withdrawing the maximum from the joint account Marcus had insisted we open. $8,000 before the card was declined, probably frozen already. I thought about my parents, imagined them waking up to FBI agents at their hotel room door, learning their new son-in-law was a monster. I couldn't call them. Park had been clear about that. Any contact could put them in danger or reveal my location. They'd be protected, he assured me, moved to a secure location until the trial was over. But I knew they'd never understand how I could have been so blind, how I could have brought this danger into our family. The safe house appeared just as the sun was rising, a modest cabin at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by pine trees. 2 SUVs were parked outside, agents in bulletproof vests, visible through the windows. As I pulled up, the front door opened, and Jennifer walked out, her arm in a sling, but very much alive. She'd been extracted from the hotel through a pre-planned route, she explained as she hugged me with her good arm. Marcus was in custody, caught trying to flee to Logan Airport with a fake passport. Margaret had been smarter already, on a private jet by the time they raided her Beacon Hill mansion, but they'd frozen all her accounts, put out international warrants. Inside the cabin, agents were everywhere, laptops and surveillance equipment covering every surface. They needed my statement immediately while everything was fresh. For 6 hours I talked until my throat was raw, going over every detail of my relationship with Marcus, every strange thing I'd dismissed, every red flag I'd explained away. They showed me evidence they'd collected, and the scope of the operation was staggering. The $50 million shipment was real, 120 women locked in shipping containers for 10 days, heading for forced prostitution and labor camps. Because of Jennifer's intel and my escape accelerating the timeline, Coast Guard had intercepted the ship, saved those women from unimaginable horror. Marcus's real identity was even worse than Jennifer had told me. Mikhail Volkov had been involved in trafficking since he was 19, working his way up through the Bratva hierarchy on a foundation of human misery. He had wives in 3 different countries, all part of his cover identities, though I was the only legal marriage. The others were just paper arrangements for visa purposes. The network included judges, police commissioners, state senators, people I'd seen at the wedding, shaking hands and making toasts. The FBI raids that morning resulted in 43 arrests, though at least a dozen key players had escaped, warned by the same leak that had triggered Marcus's panicked calls. Jennifer sat with me during the worst revelations when they showed me photos of the previous wives. Jessica Chen's autopsy report, confirming the severed brake lines. Dana Morrison's skeleton found in a warehouse in Newark, identified through dental records. Lucia Rodriguez's supposed suicide note that handwriting experts confirmed was forged. I could have been number 4 would have been if not for Jennifer's courage in breaking her cover. 6 months later, I was living under the name Claire Matthews in a small town in Montana, population 3,000. The FBI had given me a complete new identity, social security number, driver's license, even a fake work history as a librarian. My little apartment above the local bookstore was a far cry from the luxury condo Marcus and I had shared in Boston, but it was safe, and that's all that mattered. The trial was a media sensation. Russian mob boss, posed as real estate mogul, married American women as cover for human trafficking ring. The headlines were everywhere, my photo splashed across newspapers despite the FBI's efforts to protect my identity. They used an old photo from before I'd cut and dyed my hair, but I still lived in constant fear someone would recognize me. I testified via encrypted video link from an undisclosed location, spending 3 days on the witness stand detailing everything I knew. Marcus or Mikhail sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his expensive lawyers trying to paint me as a scorned woman making up stories. But the evidence was overwhelming. Jennifer's 2 years of undercover work had documented everything meticulously. The hardest part was seeing my parents on the news looking older, broken, leaving the courthouse after testifying. They'd been relocated to witness protection too, somewhere in Arizona, I thought, though we weren't allowed contact for our mutual safety. The FBI said maybe after the trial, after the appeals, after the network was fully dismantled, we could have supervised visits. Maybe. Marcus was convicted on all charges: money laundering, racketeering, human trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder. The list went on for pages. Life in prison without the possibility of parole, though his lawyers immediately filed appeals. Margaret had been caught at the Canadian border trying to cross with fake papers. She got life too, housed in a maximum security facility in Colorado. The network wasn't completely destroyed, though. Those dozen who'd escaped were still out there, and occasionally Agent Park would call to tell me they'd picked up chatter about revenge plans. I learned to shoot, got licensed to carry concealed spent hours at the range, until I could group bullets in a target's center mass without thinking. The sweet, naive girl who'd fallen for Marcus's charm was gone, replaced by someone harder, watchful, always sitting with her back to walls and her eyes on exits. I got a job at the local library, exactly what my fake resume said I'd done before. It was quiet work, peaceful, recommending books to kids, and organizing community events. My coworkers thought I was shy. Mysterious maybe, but small towns are used to people running from something. They didn't push when I declined invitations to dinner or drinks, understanding I needed space. The nightmares were the worst part. Not every night anymore, but often enough. Dreams where Marcus found me where I was, back in that hotel room. But this time Jennifer didn't come, where I was trapped in a shipping container with those 120 women. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, who specialized in trauma and didn't need to know the specifics to help me process the aftermath. Jennifer visited once a month, always arriving in different cars, always checking the apartment for bugs before we'd talk. She'd left the FBI after the trial, the stress of 2 years undercover having taken its toll. Now she worked for a nonprofit that helped trafficking victims, using her experience to train other agents and advocates. We'd become real friends, bonded by that night and its aftermath. She told me about the women from the container ship, how many were receiving help getting asylum, building new lives. Some had testified to their stories of what they'd been promised versus what awaited them, adding weight to the prosecution's case. One of them, a 19-year-old Ukrainian girl named Anya, had sent a letter through Jennifer thanking me for my courage. I kept it in my nightstand, reading it when I wondered if any of this had been worth it. A year after the trial, Jennifer brought unexpected news. There had been 3 other women married to Marcus's associates, living versions of me scattered across the country. The FBI had found them after the raids offered them protection and new identities. 2 had taken it and disappeared like me. 1 had refused, convinced her husband wasn't really involved, and was found dead 2 weeks later in what local police called a home invasion gone wrong. The investigation had also uncovered something about my selection as Marcus's bride. It hadn't been random, hadn't been real attraction at that charity gala. They'd researched dozens of women looking for the perfect combination of clean background, minimal family connections, and financial vulnerability. My student loans, my nonprofit salary, my small-town parents. All of it had made me an ideal target. The charity gala had been staged. Marcus's approach carefully orchestrated. Every moment I'd thought was spontaneous, romance had been choreographed manipulation. Learning that should have broken me, but instead it freed something. The shame I'd carried about being so blind, so stupid, lifted slightly. I'd been hunted by professionals selected and groomed by people who'd done this successfully 3 times before. Yes, I'd ignored red flags, but those flags had been carefully camouflaged by experts in deception. 2 years after that terrifying wedding night, I was different but not destroyed. The town had become home in a way Boston never was. I knew everyone who came into the library, had inside jokes with the barista at the coffee shop, helped organize the annual Harvest Festival. Claire Matthews had built a life, even if Camilla Wellington had to die for her to exist. I'd started a support group for domestic violence survivors, carefully never sharing my own story, but creating space for others to share theirs. We met weekly in the library, after hours 6 to 10 women depending on the week, talking about healing and red flags and starting over. One woman, Marie, had escaped a husband who'd controlled every aspect of her life, and as she talked, I recognized the patterns, the slow isolation, the financial manipulation, the threat of violence underneath proclamations of love. The techniques I'd learned from Dr. Chen, I passed on to the group. Grounding exercises for panic attacks, ways to rebuild trust in your own judgment, how to stop apologizing for surviving. We became each other's early warning system, calling out concerning behavior in new relationships, reminding each other that love shouldn't require us to become smaller, quieter, less ourselves. One evening, Jennifer arrived for her monthly visit with someone new. David Park, the agent who'd guided me to safety that night, who'd become a voice of calm in the chaos. He was retiring from the FBI, moving into private security consulting. They were dating, she admitted with a shy smile. I recognized as real, not the calculated expressions from her undercover days. Seeing her happy building something genuine after years of deception gave me hope that maybe I could too. The money from that night, the $30,000 Jennifer had shoved at me, I donated to organizations fighting human trafficking. It felt tainted, probably stolen from other victims, and I couldn't bear to benefit from it. But it could help others escape, could fund safe houses and legal aid and counseling services. Marcus's blood money transformed into lifelines for other women. I learned that 43 convictions had stuck from the wedding raid, the largest successful prosecution of a trafficking ring in U.S. history. The dozen who'd escaped were slowly being caught one by one as they made mistakes or got betrayed by associates looking for plea deals. Margaret had died in prison, supposedly a heart attack, though Jennifer had her doubts. Marcus was in solitary confinement after other inmates discovered what he'd done, even criminals having standards about trafficking young women. 3 years after the wedding, I met Tom at a conference for victim advocates in Denver. He was a counselor specializing in trauma recovery, had worked with survivors of everything from war zones to sex trafficking. I was there representing our small-town support group, speaking on a panel about rural resources for survivors. He approached me afterward with genuine professional interest in our grassroots approach. Coffee turned into dinner, turned into long conversations about healing and justice and the complicated path between victim and survivor. He didn't push when I said I couldn't talk about my past, just nodded and said everyone had things they carried. His thing was Afghanistan, 3 tours as an army medic before coming home to find purpose in helping others navigate trauma. We understood each other's nightmares without needing details. It took a year before I told him the truth, the whole truth on a hiking trail where no one could overhear. He listened without interrupting, without judgment, without the pity I'd feared. When I finished, he just held me while I cried, then said he was honored I trusted him enough to share it. He never treated me as fragile afterward, never questioned my decisions or my strength. Love, real love. This time felt nothing like the whirlwind with Marcus. It was quiet, steady, built on truth, even when the truth was ugly. We got married 2 years later in a tiny ceremony with 12 guests, all carefully vetted by the FBI first. My parents were there, finally safe enough to visit, though we still couldn't live in the same state. They'd aged 10 years in 5, my mother's hair completely gray, my father moving slower. But they were proud of me, of how I'd survived, of the life I'd built from ashes. Jennifer was my maid of honor. David walked me down the aisle since my father's arthritis had gotten bad. The ceremony was in the library where I worked, surrounded by books and community and chosen family. No designer dress, no 400 guests, no envelopes of cash. Just 2 people who'd seen the worst humanity could offer, choosing to believe in love anyway. We adopted a daughter the next year, one of the trafficking survivors from that container ship who'd aged out of foster care. Anya, the girl who'd written me the thank you letter, now 23, and brilliant and determined to become an immigration lawyer. She chose us as much as we chose her. Understanding that a traditional family wasn't what any of us needed. We needed people who understood that family could be built from shared survival, not just blood. I named the shelter we opened Phoenix House, for rising from ashes, for second chances, for the mythical bird that dies in flames only to be reborn stronger. We specialized in trafficking victims and women escaping what they'd thought was love, but turned out to be ownership. The FBI secretly funneled victims to us, knowing I'd understand what they'd been through, what they'd need to heal. Tom and I trained volunteers, taught them to recognize the signs I'd missed, the red flags, hidden under romantic gestures. Love bombing, we called it, when someone overwhelms you with affection to hide their true intentions. Financial control disguised as taking care of you. Isolation presented as wanting you all to themselves. The same patterns, whether the predator was a small-time abuser or an international crime boss. 5 years after that wedding night, Marcus tried to appeal again. His lawyers arguing prosecutorial misconduct, tainted evidence, coerced testimony. I had to testify again, this time in person, facing him across a courtroom. He'd aged badly in prison, the handsome facade cracked and faded. When our eyes met, I expected to feel fear or anger or something. Instead, there was nothing like looking at a stranger, which I suppose he always had been. The appeal was denied. Life without parole upheld. As they led him away, he turned to look at me one more time. I didn't flinch, didn't look away. The terrified girl in the wedding dress was gone. In her place stood a survivor who'd built a life, a family, a purpose from the ruins he'd left behind. His eyes showed he knew he'd lost more than just his freedom. He'd lost his power over me. That $30,000 and one-word run had saved my life. But what really saved me was learning that surviving wasn't enough. You had to build something from the survival, create meaning from the chaos, transform trauma into purpose. Every woman who walked into Phoenix House, every survivor who found safety and started over, was proof that Marcus and men like him didn't get the final word. Sometimes I still dream about that hotel room, about Jennifer bursting through the door, about the money scattered on the bed like fallen leaves. But now in the dreams, I don't run in fear. I run toward something, toward the life I've built, the family I've chosen, the women I'll help save. Because sometimes running away is the first step to running toward who you were always meant to be. And sometimes your salvation comes from the most unexpected place, like a sister-in-law who wasn't really a sister, carrying cash that wasn't really a gift, telling you to run when staying would have meant death. Jade saved my life that night, but Jennifer gave me the tools to build a new one. And that's the real plot twist in this story. Not that my husband was a monster, but that I became someone monsters should fear. The work continues. The shelter grows. More women arrive with their own stories of narrow escapes and second chances. Each one reminds me that while evil might be organized and well-funded and patient in its cruelty, good can be those things too. We just have to choose it, even when choosing it means leaving everything behind and starting over with nothing but $30,000 and the courage to run. Looking back, I realize the biggest lie Marcus ever told wasn't about his name or his business or his family. It was that I needed him to be complete, that his love was what gave me value. The truth is, I was always complete. I just needed to nearly lose everything to finally understand that. And while I wouldn't wish that journey on anyone, I'm grateful for where it led me. Because this life, the real one built on truth and purpose and genuine love, is worth every terrifying step it took to get here. Before we wrap up this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever ignored red flags in a relationship because the person seemed too good to be true? What signs did you miss that seem obvious looking back? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you or might help someone you know recognize danger signs, please hit that like button and share it. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories of survival and hope. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust that small voice telling you something's wrong even when everything looks perfect on the surface. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and never be afraid to run when your life depends on it. Until next time, this is Camilla reminding you that you're stronger than you know and worth more than anyone who tries to own you could ever understand.